What's up, guys? So I'm going to start doing something new at the beginning of each episode. I'm going to tell you about it in a second, but I just want to say thank you for tuning in. This is episode number 80. It really just blows my mind the way that the Lord has allowed me to have different guests and different topics and to bring a new episode each and every week. It's been 80 straight weeks. We've not missed a single week. We've been consistent the whole time. I was talking to my wife about it yesterday, how I think the only other two things that I've been more consistent at in my life is when I play basketball, because I was always practicing, always playing. And the other thing is constantly annoying her. So I'm excited. I'm thankful to have the opportunity to be able to come to you guys each and every week. Lord willing, we'll be able to keep going every single week. And it's just been something that's been a huge blessing to me. And I want to be able to encourage you guys in that way, that consistency is key. If you feel like you're called to do something, don't slack off. It's not always going to be great. It's not always going to be perfect. Rarely is the time that it's going to be perfect, but it's just that consistency. Keep putting in that work, keep putting in the effort to do something each and every week or each and every time you're called to do it. And so, like I said, I want to do something new. And I'm actually, I'm going to be completely honest and transparent. I'm shamelessly stealing this from another podcast. I recently discovered another podcast, and it's called the Next Drop Off. And they do this at the beginning of every episode where they share with you guys a review that someone has left for their podcast. And so, I've been kind of harping on that the last couple of weeks. Just encouraging you guys, if you feel led to leave a review, or if you're watching this on YouTube, to subscribe to the channel and to comment and do all those things. And so I'm going to do something each week where I read one of the reviews that's on Apple. And so if you're listening to this on Apple, and I've looked at, I don't really know how all of it works in terms of finding all of the statistics to your podcast, but I have found that most of my listeners are actually coming from Apple. And so if you're listening to this on Apple Podcast, if you would do me a favor and scroll all the way down, leave me a 5 stars and leave me a review, 4 or 5 stars, and leave a review. And I'm going to start reading one of the reviews each week. And so this goes back a year. And so I'm just going to start at the beginning. This is from RH_TX1990. And he or she, I'm not sure if it's male or female, they said, powerful encouragement in Christ, 5 stars, a great source of reminders and encouragement that we ultimately get from Christ in and through God's word. So thank you for leaving a review. I'm thankful that you're getting some encouragement from this. I said at the beginning when I started this that I wanted to encourage people, build people's faith, and point people to Christ. And through that comment, the message was at least being relayed to them. So I'm thankful. So if you want your review read on the show, and I'll give you a shout out, go ahead and go to Apple, leave a review, leave a 5-star rating, and it's greatly appreciated, because that really does. It's not just for an ego boost for me to get on there and say, because honestly, I anchor what I'm doing on Christ. So it really doesn't matter the positive or the negative. There's going to be feedback either way, positively and negatively, but neither of those hinge what I'm doing here. So I'm not reading this saying, oh, I'm so good, or this or that. These comments are literally just a tool that we can use to push to more people, because the algorithm does pick it up the more activity that it gets on here. So it's not just for an ego boost for me, because the comments, while the positive ones are great and they are encouraging to me, but it's not what I'm ultimately trying to get out of this. I'm not just trying to look for affirmation from anybody else. You know what I'm saying? And so if y'all would just do that, because it does mean a lot, and it helps a lot. And your listening and your support and your prayers mean the world to me. And I'm extremely thankful for each and every one of you guys. So a little bit about this episode. I got my guy, Danny J. I did a music live last month, and Danny was the first song that we played on there. We get into his testimony, we get into his life, his ministry work, things that he's doing at his church. And then we kind of get into this topic of church. We touch on that a little bit, something that I wanted to get into, because oftentimes on this platform, I will say things like the church does this wrong, or the church does that, or you know what I'm saying? And I don't want to come from a place where I'm just talking about the negative in the church. And so I wanted to try to bring to light a little bit the positivity in the church, because there is more positive than negative. And so with that being said, let's get into it. Hope you guys enjoy this conversation.
Welcome to the Contact Podcast.
Oh yeah, baby.
This conversation is overdue. I got my man, Danny Johnson, on the podcast today, Danny J. I'm excited about this one because not only have we been kind of communicating back and forth on Instagram. But if you follow my Instagram page or if you follow the podcast at all, you know that I started doing music lives last month. And Danny's song was actually the first song that we played on there. So I got my man Danny J on the podcast today. How you doing, man?
Hey, what's going on?
How you feeling?
Good.
Good deal. This conversation is going to be a little bit different because usually when I have a guest on, a lot of times they'll just kind of share their testimony and what they're doing and those kind of things. But like me and Danny were talking yesterday, and we're going to like specifically talk about the topic of church, because I know Danny does some work for his church. And before we do that, we got the big three, and this is just three random questions just to kind of get the ball rolling. So you ready to go?
Yeah.
All right. So question number one, if you had to be in a food eating contest, what food would you pick?
I don't know. I feel like something easy to
Yeah.
eat, like marshmallows or something. Like,
There you go.
like you
Yeah.
always just like push one more in, right? And like win, I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
I've seen some of the people like do the food eating contest, and they starve themselves, and then they just force so much down, and they like grow their insides to like fit more, and it's like crazy.
Yeah, that can't be healthy for them.
No.
That can't be healthy. Now, I didn't even think about doing something small like that. All right, so question number two. Okay, this is shout out to my man Jake. You know Jake, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, this is his question. Okay, so he said, if you were a flower, what kind of flower would you be?
I feel like I would be a sunflower.
Yeah, I like that. Myself, I don't really know a lot of different flowers. I mean, I know the sunflower, you know what I'm saying? But
Right.
yeah, my wife, because I always go over the questions with her, and she was naming all these flowers, and I'm like, okay, all right, and question number three. This is from a man Jesse over at Basically Biblical. I just found him. We just connected not too long ago. He's got a really good podcast. He said, what's your favorite Power Ranger?
I never even really watched Power Rangers.
Okay, what about Transformers?
Transformers, Bumblebee.
Yeah,
All
that's
day.
the go-to. Oh, but yeah, so that's the big three. So if you want to get into a little bit of your testimony, maybe like how you came to Christ, like I said, you do music. You could go into that, whatever you feel comfortable sharing, and then we'll get into church talk.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, my testimony is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
I didn't really grow up like in church like a lot of people are like just in church all their lives. Like I kind of discovered God kind of on my own, and God
Yeah.
really kind of just pulled me in out of nowhere. I come from a family full of alcoholics and drug addicts,
Mhm.
and when I was actually born premature, and my mom was addicted to meth while
Oh
I was in the
man.
womb, while she was pregnant with me, and for a long time. And actually, she's been over a year clean now, which is like a miracle in and of itself.
Yeah.
Just this last year or so, she's been clean and like is actually doing really good. But when I was born into just a really, really, really bad environment.
Yeah.
My parents were both in and out of jail. I got taken away by the foster system, by the state. They took me away when I was born, and then my mom tried to get her rights, to keep me, and was offered to go through something, classes or whatever to
Yeah.
get me back.
Therapy or whatever.
Yeah, and then she never followed through with it, and then so she kind of like lost me. And then my dad was in jail right at the same time for different drugs and guns and just all kinds of craziness. And they actually they went my dad was in jail while I
Mhm.
was my grandparents adopted me out of
Yeah.
the foster system. I was like put in a group home as a baby, and my grandparents adopted me, and my dad was facing charges and in jail, and he actually wrote them and said, hey, you take my son. I'm not in a position to be able to take care of him. Like, you take him, make sure he's
Right.
safe. And then he wrote them and said, hey, I want to clean my life up. I want to move out there and be around, be in his life. And so he, he got out of jail, cleaned himself up mostly, and moved out here. And my mom, I remember being like 2 years old, and I was living with my grandparents, which I still do. And my mom and my dad both lived there with me. And then all of a sudden, my mom just left, and I never heard from her for like another 10 years. Like, I didn't hear anything
What?
from her. I'm like, where did she go? you know?
Yeah.
And my family was always very open about kind of what happened. Like, oh, yeah, these are your parents. We adopted you. You have another sibling. But I knew everything, but I didn't know, obviously, when I was really little, like everything, all the details about everything, right?
Right.
But so, like, I grew up adopted by my great grandparents, right? And my dad, he lives out here as well. Like, for a long time, like, my grandparents kind of sheltered me from a lot of things,
Yeah.
but yet I still was exposed to a lot of things at the same time, right?
Sure.
And so, like, my dad was into he was just around a bunch of bad people mostly. And like, I actually talk about that in some of my music,
Yeah.
which I can get into later. But I was exposed to like marijuana, right? As a really, really young, like 8, 9 years old,
Yeah.
and I was, like drinking beer when I was like 10. Like, it was just there,
Anything
I got
goes.
my hands on it,
Yeah.
and there was this, like, I always knew it was wrong, and my dad always told me like, oh yeah, you shouldn't be doing this, and it's like I can inherently, like, I know that's wrong, right?
Right. Yeah.
But like growing up, I was like exposed to all of this stuff like super young, and like kind of saw how my dad treated my stepmom, when he gets drunk, and it's kind of gets mean and whatever, and kind of abusive sometimes.
Yeah.
But it's like once I got into middle school, I had friends who kind of grew up in similar spots. Like, their parents just do whatever, and they see
Yeah.
this and it's cool, it's normal, right? But I also, at the same time, I had this conviction of like, this isn't normal, this isn't right. Like, something's wrong here, right? And I used to justify it and say, oh well, I see my dad doing this, and he hangs out with
Yeah.
these kind of people, so I'm gonna do what I want to do, right? And kind of this rebellion stage, right? But I remember going under a bridge with a bunch of my friends, and I was getting high. I was smoking weed. We were rolling up a blunt and everything. We had all the stuff. We had, everything. We were just like a group of us, and all of a
Yeah.
sudden, this conviction, dude, just like, it just hit me. Like, I felt like God directly spoke to me and said, "Why are you doing this?" I didn't even really know who God was.
Yeah.
Like, if someone would have asked me if I believe in God, I'd tell them, "Oh yeah, of course, I believe in God. I believe in Jesus." But I really didn't even really know what that meant, like, at all. It was more of a, yeah, like, I'm gonna go to heaven, because I believe in God. But that's all. That's all I knew, right?
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I really kind of saw the dark side of my family that I really started to kind of seek out God for myself. And I'm like,
Yeah.
and I got invited by a neighbor to go to a youth group. And I went to this youth group, and I experienced just the worship and this presence of God that I had never experienced before. Right? It just like drew me in. And like from that point forward, I was like, I didn't want to be anywhere else. Like, I wanted to keep seeking this.
Yeah.
Right? And like, looking back at it, I can tell where God was in all of my life, and kind of how he protected me from so many different things. Because I had friends that were, dude, once we got into high school, they were doing coke, they were getting suspended, they were, getting arrested. A buddy of mine reached out to me. I mean, it's been a couple years now since he even reached out to me, but he was like, yeah, man, I've been on heroin for the past few years, and I want to apologize to you because back when we were in high school together, like, we would always make fun of you because you just turned into this Jesus freak, dude. This dude broke down, started crying. He was like, dude,
Hmm.
like, I was wrong because like my life is headed
Nowhere.
down the trash can, and it's like, it really hit me. I'm like, I was like super overzealous when I first got saved. I was like, oh, you
Sure.
need to repent. You're going to go to hell. Like, I was just
Yeah.
crazy like that. But, God just kind of showed me grace in the way that now I can look back and see how I can share that with others,
For sure.
and it kind of broke me a little bit when I hear my friend like crying, saying that he's just a mess and he doesn't know what to do. And he was saying that, kind of pretty much my example that I showed him was, something positive that could actually change his life around. I don't know, God can really just kind of take someone out of whatever mess they're in, you know what I mean? Because in
Yeah.
a sense, like I was pretty much at my lowest of lows. I was doing whatever the heck I wanted, and God kind of just plucked me out and said, "No, I have something different for you."
Wow. That's a crazy testimony. Like I said, we've talked back and forth a couple times. I had no idea that it was your upbringing was like that. So whenever you said that your grandparents were kind of strict on you, were they followers, or they were just strict because they like didn't want you to turn out like your parents?
Like they just sheltered me. I was just they tried to just kind of keep me away from those influences, although, life is life and I get kind of sucked into all of it anyways just cuz that's what I was around, right?
You're a product of like the 5 people that you hang around with. So like if you hang around with, people that are messing around with drugs, people that are doing the wrong thing, you're more than likely going to be, falling into that category. You know what I'm saying? But that's another thing too, and it just kind of just goes back to that topic of church. And it was actually something that I wanted to bring up, is how you said that, how you were zealous at first and you're kind of just like going at your friends, telling them, you need to repent and this and that. But that's one of the things that my pastor just talked about this on Sunday, is that how are you supposed to know if you're not being properly discipled? You know what I'm saying? So you just knew, like, okay, I know Jesus now. I'm different now. I got to tell other people about him, but you didn't know, how to do it. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And so like, if you look in, I think it's the last chapter of Matthew. I think it's Matthew 28. In the last verse, Jesus tells his disciples, go forth and make disciples. You know what I'm saying? So that's like the responsibility for us as Christians. If you've been a Christian for a while, if you've been somebody that's going to church and you see like a newcomer coming in there, or like a younger person that they just got saved or whatever, to go to them and try to like disciple them properly. Like, cause like discipling people isn't just going and trying to reach the lost, but it's also like helping the new Christians, the people that just found Christ. Because like a lot of times the church, it seems like, okay, we want you to get saved, and then when you get saved, it's just like, okay, you're good. Now we're going to try to go reach somebody else. But that's the thing that I love about the church that I go to, and there's so many great churches that are like this. But it's just like it's you're walking alongside fellow believers, growing together in faith. You know what I'm saying? And like that's the kind of stuff that we're supposed to be doing. That's the side of the church that I kind of want to highlight tonight. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah.
So you talked about, because I know you work at your church. I want to talk about that in a minute. But you brought up the music, how you kind of have some music talking about your dad as well. So what led you to want to get into music at all?
Yeah, I mean, I just grew up on rap music
Yeah,
from
I
my
feel you.
dad. Like he always had the nice car, the nice rims, the speaker system, like subwoofers.
Yeah.
Like I would,
Yeah.
uh, he had like what was it? He had a Chevy Caprice, and
Mm-hmm.
he had just these giant subwoofers in the trunk, and like I
Yeah.
would get so excited when he'd turn the bass up, and the whole thing would just be shaking, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or we would stand outside of the car, and I'd sit on the back, and it'd just be vibrating because the music was blasting, right?
Yeah.
And so I grew up just around rap music, around music, and then
Sure.
when I got saved, I was like, it was funny because the very first like Christian song that really like hit me, like it wasn't a hymn, it wasn't a song that we sang at church, it was KB.
Mm-hmm.
I found a KB song. It was off of his very first album, like Weight and Glory
Yeah.
from 2012. I found this KB
Yeah.
song, and it was called Open Letter. And that song talks about lust, and it talks
Mm.
about just stuff, and like that's also been a part of my testimony, is struggling with lust and dealing with addiction and pornography and like all of that stuff. It consumed me, and it
Yeah.
consumed me so much. And I remember when I had to be like 13 or 14 when I first just this song just popped up out of nowhere, and it was KB, and I started
Mm.
crying, dude. And this was even before I really even realized even what it was. And I go back and listen to
Yeah.
it. I'm like, "Oh wow. Like that's what he's talking about." Right?
Mm-hmm.
And I always just wanted to get into music, and it wasn't even until recently where I started just really just getting real with kind of my story and what I've been through. because
Yeah.
for the longest time, it was always hard for me to just talk about things.
Yeah.
And like, I'd always just been kind of sheltered and just shelled up and just kind of introverted. Right.
Hmm.
But I feel like God is just calling me to specifically just be vulnerable and just to get deep and just to get real with people, and
Yeah.
it's through music that's kind of helped me. Like, I hear other people's struggles and stories, and it gives me hope, you know,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's just powerful because it's
Oh
just
yeah.
my expression of worship.
Hmm.
It's me pointing back to Jesus, right? And it's how I creatively express, everything that God has done in my life, right? And I
Yeah.
just want to be like authentic and like raw with everything, just because that's kind of what music did for me.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. And I heard a pastor say a while back that your passions are connected to your purpose. Satan tries to steal those passions away from you because he knows that those passions that you have inside of you were planted inside of you by God to use to point back to him. Anything in your life, Satan tries to take it away the moment that he sees that it could bear fruit. Because like in John 15:16, Jesus said, I've called you to bear fruit. And so like if you can bear fruit through the talent that he's given you, as soon as Satan realizes that that can be used, he tries to pounce on it. But yeah, the that's funny too that you're talking about the speaker system in the back. When I was in high school, my senior year, I had a what did I have? I can't remember the car that I had, but I had got two tens and a big box took up the whole trunk, and they sounded like 20s just because they were so loud. And I remember when I first got the car, it was a Taurus, a Ford
Mm,
Taurus. It's like like the newer Ford Taurus that the police officers drive, a lot of cops drive.
right.
It's like those. And so I remember I went to go hang out with some of my friends, and we met at the mall, and we were all going to ride together. And I went and got in their car, and as soon as I did, I sat down and I like put my seatbelt on, and I looked up, and they were all like the two in the front and the one that was beside me. They all turned around, and looked at me, and I was like, do y'all want to ride in my car? They're like, yeah, yeah, yeah. So they
Nice.
will, turn the music up. But yeah, so I know what you mean. Music's always been something that like has been like a passion in my life too. I've never, made music or anything like that, but I love listening to music because, like you said, it's just that expression of pointing back to God. I mean, you look all throughout Scripture. We're supposed to worship. We're supposed to, glorify God in songs. And so, you want to talk a little bit about the stuff that you do at your church?
Yeah. So it's a crazy story because
Yeah.
when I got saved, I started going to a youth group. Like, it was in high school when I first got saved, and then I
Hmm.
graduated high school. I start serving in youth group. I start doing helping with worship and stuff in the youth group. And at that same time, I actually dropped out of community college and I enrolled into ministry school. And so I'm in
Wow.
ministry school online through like an extension campus through a big, accredited university. Um, and so I'm serving in youth group, college student, ministry school, and I start sensing that like things are shifting, and I'm like, I feel like God is kind of about to change the direction on me a little bit. And so my youth pastor calls me out of nowhere, and she calls me up. She's like, "Hey, um, our lead pastor got a phone call from somebody while he was on vacation. He reached out to him and asked him if he knew anybody that wanted to start getting involved in ministry and wanted to start helping in youth ministry." And she was like, "I gave him, your contact information. Just let me know, and then I'll get you guys connected." Right. And so this lead pastor of another church, it's about 25 minutes away from me, while
Yeah.
my church is like 10 minutes, like right down the road. This other church is just a little bit further out. Uh, we meet up for coffee, and I just kind of shared a little bit about, what I was wanting to do. Like, I'm called into ministry. I want to help youth. I want to, I shared a little bit of my testimony and coming from brokenness, and God is, kind of working on me and whatever. And then, um, he kind of talked to me for a little bit, and he's like telling me, he's like, I want to bring in somebody that doesn't really have any experience, because sometimes when people are trained up a certain way, they kind of have a system that they follow, and he wants to bring somebody in fresh that he can kind of mentor. This is somebody who he's planted a church, and he was also in youth ministry for like over 10 years. And so he was in youth ministry, and then he planted his own church, and then now he wants to bring someone new in, right? And he has connections. He's friends with, even my old youth pastor, right? That he talked about wanting to, he could have brought somebody in that has 10 years of experience, but he's like, I feel like I want to bring someone in that's new, someone that I can train up and build up, right? And he kind of took me under his wing. So I was, for a while, I was going to both churches because my youth group now is on Sunday nights and my old youth group was on Wednesday nights. And so I was going there on Wednesday nights and then going to a totally new church on Sundays and just trying to get acclimated with the people and stuff. And he told me, while we were drinking coffee at Starbucks, he said, "Now I want you to go home and pray about this." Right. And he said, "I want this to be a God thing, not just a good thing." Right. And like when I went home and prayed about it, like I felt this confirmation. I felt this peace, right? That I knew that this is where I'm supposed to go. Right. Mm-hmm. And then he also said, "Hey, show up at my church. I'm not going to tell anybody who you are. I'm not going to tell anybody anything. I'm not going to say anything to anybody. Just act like you're visiting." Right. Yeah. Which essentially that gives everyone the just first impression, right? What is the first impression that your church is going to give, when somebody new walks in, right? So I come in, I sit in the back, it's funny because I got greeted just the warmest like greeting that I've ever gotten from somebody. And, it was, I felt very welcomed and I felt very just loved and seen. Right. And it's like, I just kind of sit in the back. I'm kind of just doing my own thing. And then, it was really cool because his prayer of like, "Okay, is this where you want me?" Like it was confirmed in that moment. Yeah. Of this is where I'm supposed to be. So like a couple weeks go by and then me and my pastor are gonna, he wants to help me. Like I have a message and everything prepared for a youth group. Right. And so I'm preaching. Like this is my first message at a new church. And I actually had this prepared at in my old youth group, and I actually did it in my old youth group, and it went pretty well. And I was, he was telling me, he's like, come up with something so you can preach. Right. And then he's like, "Yeah, we're going to get there. I'm going to make sure that I introduce you to everybody. It's going to be good. It's going to be comfortable. You're going to be fine." Right. So I get there Sunday night. He goes in the corner, shuts the lights off, points at me and says, "Go." And I almost passed out, dude. Yeah, I bet. There's probably 20 kids in this room. I don't know a single one of them. Their eyes are just like,
yeah, they don't know what's up.
And I'm looking like this too. I'm like, what the heck? This isn't what you said was gonna happen. Yeah. But I was like sweating, dude. I'm like profusely sweating. Like my armpits are all, like
yeah.
bad. And I have a little, presentation like PowerPoints, and I'm just like I'm getting through it. Yeah. As best as I can. I'm like, that was awkward. A couple months go by and we sit down in the office and he's like, "Listen, I did this to you on purpose." He said, "I did this to you so that you would know what it's like to be put on the spot and be able to navigate this circumstance and to see how you would respond to this." Right. Which is it's like, it's huge now looking at it. Now that I've been here a couple years, it's like, it's huge because it's like, he was telling me this is ministry 101. Like sometimes things aren't going to go as planned and you have to figure out how to make it work. It was a coaching moment of him just kind of letting me loose. Right. Yeah. But he's like, he gives me that slack to like be able to jump out and just kind of figure it out on my own.
A lot of times whenever we think like speaking in front of people or doing any kind of ministry work, it's something that can feel like it's so overwhelming. But then you're like, okay, well, if I know that it's going to be in this confined space with people that I know and that I'm comfortable and this and that, but it's like, no, there's going to be moments in your life, especially if you're seeking to point people to Christ, that you could just bump into in the street. And you have to be ready to say something in that moment, So not only was he like preparing you to be able to speak in front of people, but also just for if you're thrown into a scenario where it's like, okay, I have to present the gospel or I have to say something about Jesus in this moment. It's one of those things too. That's like you got to be ready for, because there's been times where, because I try to wear a shirt that says some has a Bible verse or something about Jesus on there, and when you do that, people will approach you. You know what I'm saying? And so it's one of those things that I welcome it, because I want to, speak to as many people as I possibly can about Jesus. But at the same time, when somebody comes up to you and if they have a question, you want to be able to answer their question. And one of the verses, I wrote down 3 verses that I wanted to say tonight, and one of them is Hebrews chapter 5, verse 12. Because one thing that I think the church, I'm just going to speak from my church, the church that I go to, because I know there are churches out there that don't do things the right way. So I'm just speaking from my experience, from what I have felt and received at my church. They do a good job of, like I said earlier, discipleship. And so Hebrews chapter 5, verse 12, it says, For though by this time you ought to be teachers, you need someone to teach you again the basic principles of the oracle of God. So there's like, there comes a point where Paul is saying to, this church here, like, I thought you guys would be teaching by now. I thought y'all would be to the point spiritually mature enough to where you can go out and teach, yet you're still drinking milk instead of getting into the meat of the word, able to teach others and to disciple others. And I just think that that's paramount, that we as followers of Christ, we're making sure we do our part to feed our spirit and to make sure that we're in the word and that we're right, spiritually speaking with God, but then also be at that level to where we can teach other people and disciple other people in the church. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so there was another verse too I wanted to get into, and then we can go on from there. But James chapter 3, verse 1, it says, not many of you should be teachers, my brothers, for you know that we who teach will be judged with greater strictness. That verse really spoke to me a lot when I first read it, because I don't consider myself a teacher at all, but the Lord has given me, I don't have the biggest platform in the world, but the Lord has given me a platform to where people have reached out to me and said they learned this or they learned that from a video that I posted, or, a podcast or something like that. So even if I don't consider myself a teacher, the Lord has put me in a position to where the things that I'm saying, it's resonating with people. You know what I'm saying? And
Right.
so when we are followers of Christ and we are willing to put our voice out there and try to speak on the things of Christ, we have to make sure that we are saying the proper things, because when we give an account one day, we're going to be judged stricter. You know what I'm saying? Because we're telling somebody something that they don't know, and they're taking it as, okay, I feel like I can trust this source,
Right. Yeah, we get held to a higher standard just being in the position that we're in, because we're supposed to be shepherding people in whatever, no matter if it's a handful or if it's a full congregation. Like if God has called you to be of that, to be a teacher or a preacher or just anything really. It's like when we're pouring into other people, like we're going to be held accountable for what we teach those people.
Yeah.
Because it's not something there's so many people. I mean, it talks about in the Bible that, in the end times, right, that so many people are going to be led astray. There could be some of the most famous, well-known preachers that are well loved and respected by so many people that are actually leading people astray. And it's like, you have to have discernment to really be able to figure out, like, is this from the Lord or is this just groupthink, psychology, everyone feels good, and there's and it's like, even as me, like, stepping into ministry, like, just lately, it's been a heaviness on me to, like, respect the position that I'm in, and I even was telling my pastor a couple weeks ago, I was like, this is no joke. Like, this is serious. Like, he's allowing me to be on the pulpit, I was, put on the rotation to do our Wednesday night Bible studies. And like, he was giving me the platform to preach, to teach. And it's like, I'm not taking that lightly, I got to really take it seriously. And of course there's going to someone might say something that might be off a little bit or whatever, and everyone can be
Yeah.
corrected. But
Yeah.
it's been heavy on me to like just take it serious. It's like these are
Hmm.
God's people, these are vulnerable people, right? These are souls, right? And it's like their blood is on your hands, if you lead them astray.
Yeah. 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 We have to take that kind of stuff seriously. It's funny that you said that because it kind of brought something up in my mind that I was thinking about earlier today. I was, and this is kind of a weird analogy, but just stay with me. So I was driving down the road the other morning, and I saw a dog that had got run over. It was dead on the side of the road, right? And so I was like, I hate, I'm not a huge animal lover, but nobody likes to see, an animal that got hurt or run over, whatever. And so as I was driving past it, I was thinking about it because there's a lot of homeless people, downtown Chattanooga where I live. Anywhere you turn, you see homeless people. And, your gut reaction a lot of times is just like, you just go past them, or you don't even say anything to them. You don't even give them a second thought. And it kind of clicked with me when I saw that dog. I'm like, I'm showing more emotion toward this dog that doesn't have a soul, yet I'm passing up people who are literally dead in their trespasses of sin, and they don't have a future if they don't have someone that tells them to come to Christ, or if they're not presented with a gospel. You know what I'm saying? So it just like really hit me, and it's just crazy how God can use something like roadkill to be like, okay, you really need to be paying attention to what you're doing and who you're giving more affection to, because like that animal, once it's gone, it's gone. But these people, these souls that are out there, like you said, you're speaking to, literally pouring into people, into souls that live forever, and they're good. There's only two places that you're going to go when you're gone. You know what I'm saying? And so, that's just it is a heavy burden, because it's like this is literally life or death stuff. But then also, a lot of things that I see that people talk about, and I've even talked about it on here, is the bad the church hurt. In your opinion, what are some things that you see that the world kind of misconstrues the church to be? You know what I'm saying?
Like a lot of times when I talk to people that have grown up in church, like I was watching your interview with Jake, and
Yeah.
he shared about his story of growing up in the church and stuff, and I was talking to him one on one about it a little bit, and it's like sometimes people just put on a face, right? That they act one certain way, but then behind closed doors, they're totally different. And I think the biggest thing for leaders and for pastors at churches, it's like we got to make sure that we're living the same way that we preach about. Like we got to make sure that we're not only preaching about it, but we're actually living it, you know. And it's like
Yeah.
it's okay to be vulnerable and it's okay to be real. I actually got to share my testimony in front of my whole entire congregation. And it was like part of me was like, I don't want to open up about struggles,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it's like, but it's okay, right?
Yeah.
Something that I've learned from one of my mentors is that it's okay to not be okay, but it's not okay to stay there,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like it's okay to
Mm-hmm.
not be okay. It's okay to say that you screwed up, to say that you messed up. It's okay to not be perfect, right? None of us are perfect, right? But it's not okay to stay there, right? And until you release that, until you confess that, until you open up about that, you're just going to stay in whatever broken place you're in, right?
Yeah.
But when you actually give space to just be real and to be vulnerable and to be honest, that's when God can change you.
I was reading a while back in John. I've been really, I don't know, I've just been feeling like a draw to the book of John. So I've just kind of been reading it slowly, been like going over and over and over it.
I was just
And
reading
so,
in John in youth group
oh, for
on
real?
Sunday.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
John.
love the book of John. But I don't remember the chapter off the top of my head, but whenever, um, Peter denies Jesus, they ask him, the first person asks him, hey, weren't you the one that was following Jesus? And he's like, I'm not. No, I'm not. And then somebody asks him again, he's like, I'm not. And then, he gets asked the third time. He's like, I'm not. I'm telling you, I'm not. And then when they ask Jesus, they're like, are you who the people say that you are? And he's like, I am. And that really stuck with me because that's like how it is for us. Like, we're not, but he is. And so, like, while he's perfect, we're these fallen, in this fallen flesh, in this fallen state, we're going to make those mistakes. But understanding that we're pointing to and we're looking to the one that is, the one that says, I am, the one that forgives us when we fall and picks us up. And like you said, the church does get that rap of being judgmental. But I think that a big misconception to people is like, if you grew up in church and that church was judgmental to you, that's just how every church is. You know what I'm saying? So it's
Right.
like, I tried to go to church when I was a kid, but they were too judgmental. So now I'm not going to go now. I'll just, I still believe in God. I can worship God out here. I've heard people say that, like, I can worship God out here fishing, or I can worship God while I'm out here doing this and doing that. And it's like, yeah, you can, but are you really going to do it? You know what I'm saying? First of all, and then second of all, we need that church aspect just for community. You know what I'm saying? Like getting together with those like-minded individuals, because this whole topic kind of sparked to me because we just started Awana at our church Sunday. We had Sunday mornings. We went to Sunday school, then we went to church service, and then we had Awana for the kids that night. And it was the first night back for Awana because they take off during the summer. And so we were pretty much at church all day long. And when we left the church service Sunday night, we were driving home, and my wife was like, I want to go back to church, And I was like, yeah. And my kids love going to church. And when I was growing up, I used to dread going to church. I wasn't a big fan of going to church at all because we went to such a strict church that was very judgmental, but they were also too, they put a lot of, the Bible talks about parents don't need to, I forget the word that it says in the Bible, but basically not to put too much stress on your child. The churches that we grew up in, it was like, I knew that Sunday after church, I was going to get in trouble at service for either talking to somebody or doing something during the service, and I was going to get a spanking or something after church. You know what I'm saying? So it was like, I grew up with that mindset, like, oh crap, when I go to church, I'm probably going to get in trouble because I can't sit still because I'm 5 years old. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And so I think a lot of that too, that generation, a lot of people grew up like that. And so now they're not as willing to like go to church now because they're like, I remember how church was for me growing up. And I don't want my kids to ever be in that spot where they're like, oh gosh, I don't want to go to church. I hate going to church, And so that my kids, thankfully, thank God, they love church because it's such a, like you described your church, it's so welcoming and inviting. And, everybody knows their names and everybody knows, where they're supposed to be and this and that. And they've been able to get in there and not only get involved with the classes, but make friends in there too. So it's just like, while certain churches can be judgmental, like the true heart of a church that's trying to go at things the right way is welcoming people and walking alongside them and helping them grow in their Christian walk. So the last couple episodes, I've just felt led to kind of give the last word to my guest because I know that each of us, we're all going through different obstacles or different trials or different, times in our spiritual walk. So is there something, and if there's nothing, I could just edit this out. It's no big deal. But is there something specifically going on that you'll be willing to share that maybe you're going through in life, or maybe that's something God is revealing to you or working on you about? Is there anything you'd be willing to share as far as that goes?
In October, I'm actually getting my official certificate of ministry through Assemblies of God.
There you go.
And they're going to have a service at my church and like
that's
honor
awesome.
me for that. And so that's like really exciting. And I feel like,
yeah, man,
stepping into that, like there's just going to be a lot of new things. And it's like, I know that God is continuing to like kind of shift everyone, like almost as like a family unit. Like our whole church right now is like, we're all growing together and we're all pouring into each other. And so it's like, it's super exciting, but like, sometimes it's hard just kind of growing, growth can be hard, it can, like there's sometimes I'm just in a wave of like, everything is going awesome. And then sometimes everything just sucks, cause it's just draining and I'm exhausted and I'm tired, but like, I want to make sure that I have that balance of like, just being able to be poured into as much as I'm pouring out, right?
Yeah.
Because that can be kind of hard sometimes, because sometimes I can just empty myself and then I'm just stay empty. But it's like I want this to be flowing. I want this to be full. So it's like, so I can consistently, like a faucet, like I can consistently be pouring out, right? And then
Yeah,
be
man.
filled up.
The way David describes it, I think it's in Psalm 23, where he says, my cup runneth over. Yeah, that's I love that, dude, because that's how we should be in our life. And those lows, that's one thing that I've been experiencing too, just in my life. And that's one thing that I love. You said it a couple times about how you didn't want to share your backstory, and sometimes you felt like a little, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like a little bit like you couldn't, maybe you couldn't share some of the stuff a little bit. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah.
Well, because like I think a lot of Satan doesn't want us to realize that while each of us are unique and special in our own way, like our stories are not unique. You know what I'm saying? Like in terms of you went through the things you were going through, and somebody else might have been going through the exact same thing. Maybe not the exact moments that you went through, but
Right.
but in some way your stories can be similar. And Satan doesn't want us to get to that point where you're able to connect with that person and grow with them, because they can say, look, I can relate to what you're talking about because I went through the same thing. You know what I'm saying? Because that's where growth and community and opportunities to really rub it in his face, to say, I didn't let those things that happened in my past get me down. I'm still pointing to God through this no matter what.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so that's one thing that God has really been laying on my spirit heavily too, is just those moments where you feel like this sucks, or the moment that you feel like, this isn't going where I think it's going, or stress or anxiety is trying to take over. It's just like, you have to remember that Satan is trying to actively do anything that he can to keep you from getting where God wants you to go. You know what I'm saying? So just keep going. So I want to say that to you too. Like, I know with this new level that you're getting to in terms of getting your certificate and all that, I know there's going to be a level of spiritual attack, Satan trying to come at you and discourage you in some way, or try to get you to downplay the importance of that next step. But just stay striving after the kingdom, stay doing everything that you can to point to Christ. So you got any final thoughts before we get out of here?
I'm just glad I was able to come on here and just share and talk, and I think it was edifying, and I just appreciate the opportunity, honestly.
Yeah, man. We'll have to do it again. If you got something you want to send, I'm doing another one of those lives later this month. If you want to send me something, love to get into it.
Can I send some unreleased stuff?
Yeah, come on with it.
All
Come on,
right.
I'll take it. Whatever you got, I'll take it. Like I said, I'm thankful that anybody would be, the more that you sit, like, at least for me personally, the more I sit and I think about the things that God has allowed me to do, because there's no reason why you would want to send me music, or there's no reason why anybody that sent me music would be willing to send me music. But I was just like overwhelmed with the first time, because when I put it out there, I'm like, I don't even know if one person's going to send something. And then I had like 20 something people send me music. And I was like, oh, dang, like what? There's no reason for that other than God just opening doors and making things happen.
Right.
And so I was like, initially I was like, okay, I got 20 songs here, 20 plus songs. I could just break these up, and I can do, because I'm planning on doing one live a month. I can do 5 songs here, 5 songs next month, 5 songs, like that. But then I just felt like in my spirit that God was like, I called you to do this, so you need to trust me that I'm going to provide when it comes. And so I was like, okay. So I felt like he was just like, do all the music that was sent in. So like we were live for like over 2 hours.
Right.
And but I was just like, I feel like God is
good, but
yeah, it was long. It was long. Yeah, it was long. It was draining. Like, we were exhausted after, but it was just like, it was so much fun, and I'm so thankful to do it. And right after it was over, I was kind of like, I went upstairs, and because we had ate early that night, me and my wife, and I was like, I'm starving. And by that time, I was like, the only thing that's open is like Taco Bell. I'm like, you want some tacos? And she's like, I guess. So I was like, okay, I'm going to run to Taco Bell. And so like I was praying on the way to Taco Bell, like, Lord, if this is, I do feel like you have called me to do these lives where I'm, breaking down this music and in this music or whatever. So like, if this is your will for me to do it next month, I trust you to provide me with something for next month. And so I went on my Instagram and right as soon as I hit send, I get an email and somebody sent me a song. And so I was just like, oh, wow. So even if it's just one song, which more people have sent music since then, but it's just like the way that God just continues to, like you said, pour unwarranted on my part, because there's like no reason for him to bless in that way other than just the fact that he just loves us. And
It's like it's unconditional.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, yeah, man, this has been a lot of fun. I appreciate you coming on. Appreciate you taking the time to come on here and chop it up with me for a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I'll put all your information for your music, and you got a lot. I'll say this about the graphics and stuff that you have for your music. All that stuff is dope, dude. You're killing it as far as that goes. I love that stuff. So I'll put all your stuff, your Instagram, your music, places to find you on there. You want to tell the people, I don't know off the top of my head your username. You want to tell the people, where to find you on Instagram and all that stuff?
Yeah, my Instagram is at Story of Danny J. Yeah, my music is just under Danny J.
Danny J. Love it. Thank you guys so very much for taking the time to listen today. Hopefully you guys were encouraged by this conversation. Lord willing, same time next week. God bless you guys.